Gyda'n chai program chrylig sy'n treinador The World About Us, y janting blione on yn behe 3 badgen on yn rysg tua. Hwgeri, Tayari, agos Balaroi. Hadisys na ddientyn ha machyd cwnard toroch rysg tua, ydd behe agos biolan sy chymal di mach gyninne. Talaf unaldrig dy chrwhys cyddill, agos talaf atioch son bar. Ach a cwdioch plisiol son biastys hwsyn agos nianfaich. Chai the Corncrake and the Croft di gianw ag awn na dda obydd yn erin has dyn ure di siawn chlach gyn. Ach fiws yn orsyn fa doien agos unaf yn urig yn ysdiach y fel ag bwyach edyn obydd sio agos edyn arinioch.
Diolch na ryfad y cwprwch ar y natig al mawns. Na ryfad cwsnig al mawn. Rhaid na ffobl sio, sy'n ffilm y fasyn.
Raniach the Corncrake and the Croft hadis et blione, jawaf kolonde et cwrische fa uisje tua coloch, hadis et cychla Brian.
As machine is se lijn kamal hoog va barachune de daus va nu recht dus hier kan weg het die kroon groen hier se kopet houdt gaat het of je niet se weg het studio in recht de weg is die kamerach gelauw dat al het goede tunje.
Aman talacharen is ha naid de naartje krinochig son Corum the Corncrake and the Croft diken, 3 planagia carichit as jay y chrylig. Yn laher cwtch na chrofiws bio i gynnaw, zat ule cwngad ad urge di parste jachtrin y skide eichen.
This is the west coast of the Outer Hebrides. Between us and America there is nothing but sea. Right here on this tangled rocky shore, the Atlantic finally stopped the trek of the early Celts north and west across Europe. Their final voyage took them across the Minch to the Western Isles, as we call them today, to the unpromising land of North Uist. They found a bleak country, pounded out of the oldest rock in the world by the force of the Atlantic, and sand, which in its turn had made an uneasy marriage with peat to form a belt of barely arable land round the coast. In Gaelic we call it Macher. Gradually homesteads built up in clusters, their sites originally decided by conditions for living and defense. Invaders came hopefully and left disappointed. Even the Vikings who ravaged Uist left little mark. Of the 3 townships which fringe this most westerly promontory of North Uist, only Hoigere takes its name from the Norse. The other 2, Tayari and Balranald, are Gaelic. The old clan system was destroyed with Prince Charlie, and the Clanranald lands became huge sporting and sheep estates. The clansmen who weren't evicted overseas were allowed to squeeze livings out of the coastal patches and rough seas. Crofters, they're called now. They have clung on. Their traditions are being eroded by the media and mainland influence, but Gaelic is still the language of their family and church. This is a typical croft. By law, it is now secure to the crofter and his heirs. It's really a miniature farm, too small to provide a comfortable living, too tiny for mechanization. Communal effort has to make do for that, and without cooperation, the crofting life would be totally impossible.
Well,
everybody helps everybody else, says Callum MacDonald. They're with me today and they'll be with somebody else tomorrow. Neil MacDonald of Hoigere gives a helping hand to Donald John MacDonald of Balranald. The chances are that, given a gentle breeze and a dry day tomorrow, they'll be with Angus. As well as his croft, Angus runs the post office, quietly tailoring the one job to the other perhaps, because in this kind of community it may sometimes be more urgent to thrash the corn than it is to stamp the mail. The post office may be run by the clock, but season and weather, dawn and dusk alone can govern the work of the croft. Communal effort ensures that the infirm are never forgotten, and that the widow gets her share. North Uist houses are unsheltered against the Atlantic gales, for this is a bare and treeless land. Even the birds, like the starling and the skylark, have to improvise, or else they're bred to accept man's poles and posts as the trees and bushes that their kith and kin know elsewhere, as the young Uistman is bred to accept the croft as his future. Angus, the post office, knew from boyhood that one day he would have to make his living on the croft that was his father's.
The crofts we have here, they're a bit small. I happen to be one of the more fortunate ones. I work 4 crofts here, but they only amount to about 10 acres each. The crofts are quite good for grazing, but they're not much use for cropping at all. We're quite dependent on the Macher land. It's from the Macher we take most of our crops.
Their sheep and their cattle are the mainstays of the crofter's economy. Each family has a milk cow of tough but indeterminate breed. Crofters have neither the feeding nor the weather for dainty pedigrees, and when it comes to the annual calving, crofting wives like Jean MacDonald have to lend a soothing or at least a helping hand.
Eikä skripare.
there's a lot of benefits attached to having a cow, although sometimes, you've got to milk it at a certain time in the morning and the evening, and you've got to be there. There's quite a lot of work attached to milk.
A milking cow with a calf at foot used to be the dowry of a Hebridean bride, but times are changing now, and it's much more likely that today's new arrival is regarded by Callum and Jean as a credit entry in the family budget when the cattle sales come round. The waves which burst on the US shores have travelled miles in from the Atlantic, and the ground swell has uprooted the tangle and the seaweed from the bottom of the ocean to cast them finally on the beaches. 150 years ago, kelp, which was burnt to make chemicals for glass and soap, was a thriving industry in Uist, and when it collapsed, its loss caused one of the many waves of poverty that have swept this island. Nowadays, there's a thriving alginate industry in some parts of the Hebrides, with the product from the seaweed being used in the cosmetic and medical trades. But it hasn't been developed here, for which the turnstones and the sandelings are doubtless grateful, for the torn weed carries with it a huge bonus of food for them. The sandelings are visitors on their way north to the Arctic to breed. The turnstones also are only passing through. The purple sandpiper winters here, and soon follows the sandeling north. Like the birds, the Uist man accepts the sea's bounty and uses it in the way which nature surely intended.
We do the seaweeding early in the year, January if possible. That depends on whether it's to be found on the shore at that time of year. It grows on the reefs quite a bit up from the shore, and with the gales it gets torn off the reefs and blown onto the shore. Now the seaweed is far better than artificial fertilizer, especially for the potato crop.
At first, the sand is loose and easily wind-blown, and nothing will grow in it except the springy marram grass, which is useless for cattle feed. But it has another use which is invaluable. As it grows, its roots intertwine tightly, and it binds the sand and holds it firm. The seaward face of the sand dunes may be blown by westerly gales, but the Macher land is protected in the lee of the marram belt. Over generations, the Uist men have practiced an elementary form of land reclamation by encouraging the marram to hold the front. Without the marram, the Macher would soon be a wind-blown desert, and any attempt at ploughing it would only make it easier for the wind to blow the top sand away. Bound by the marram roots and fed with copious dressings of seaweed from the shore, the Macher can be encouraged to grow luxuriantly and even be strengthened sufficiently for the plough. In the winter and early spring, the Macher is bare and has little to offer in the way of food for beast or bird. But the whooper swan has learnt a thing or two. It knows that this is the time against which the crofters made provision in the autumn, and that it's essential for them to feed their cattle and their sheep through the lean, cold months. Recently, the swans have learnt that the Land Rover will appear regularly with loads of corn, and crofters like Angus John McClellan to dispense it.
The swans, they come into us in October. They come to the Machar, and when we start feeding the cattle, they start feeding along with the cattle. But it's unusual for us to see this. It's just happened a couple of years back when these whooper swans, that's when they started to come in to feed along with the cattle and feed on the fields or feed on the fallen grain. We get the geese earlier than the swans, and we get the ducks, but they make quite a bit of mess on the corn right enough, but we're not worried about them. We fairly get a dish out of them now and again. We don't touch the swans. Some folks say that it's a woman that had a curse put on, one of these princess that had a curse, and more or less that she's a woman than a bird. That's why everybody keeps away from her.
The Croft land surrounds what was once an arm of the sea, but it's now a huge stretch of marsh, Lán Gullar, the Gullar Marsh. It's probably a Viking name. There's nothing like it in the whole of the Western Isles for size. The older crofters remember when the shoveler was here as one of a much larger variety of duck, and he still mates here, but in fewer numbers now. The same applies to many birds, and it's probably because the character of the marsh is changing over the years, and therefore the supply of the right food is diminishing or altering in quality. The birds are protected now, and a warden supervises the area, but it may be a bit late for some birds already. The little grebe is not as plentiful as he used to be, and the phalarope doesn't breed here anymore. Not so the redshank, who, along with all the rest, now enjoys the safety of Gullar and can pursue his courtship unmolested. In 1966, the crofters of Hoikerry, Tayari and Balranald agreed to a nature reserve being set up by the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. They may have thought the idea a bit daft at first, but there was no obvious harm in it. To them, who had grown up among them, birds were just birds, except for the ones that were good to eat. The redshank, or the peary as they call him, was not one of those. Ducks, like the mallard, were a different matter. Today, however, on Gullar, the mallard is allowed to multiply in peace, and the peary seems set to follow his example. While the water birds have been in decline in North Uist, not because the crofters were eating them all, but because the marshes were being drained, birds like the lapwing continue to flourish unharmed and unmolested, relatively speaking. The lapwing The buntings, the finches and the pied wagtail will thrive in Uist so long as the crofter continues his traditional form of agriculture and is not seduced by the chemical catalogues. But there's a more fundamental threat to the future of the crofting tradition, and youngsters like Alistair MacDonald might have chosen a different way of life in different circumstances.
I acquired the glebe before this year. It's quite a big area. It's over on the diggers. We've got another 2 crofts. I didn't really want to be a crofter, but I started the work just before I left school, so I didn't have much choice, really.
For his father, the measured tread of crofting life has been the beginning and end of ambition, and Alistair, for all his restlessness, senses a quality in his father's world.
But sometimes I say to myself, wish I'd gone somewhere else. But no, I don't think I can go anywhere else now, because when I go to the mainland, especially the big cities, I see the life there, where to get through to the peace.
There is a saying in this part of the world that when God made time, he made plenty of it. But the crofter's time was never taken up with bird watching, and yet he noted them in his songs, his proverbs, and his sayings. How Corncrake, they used to say, you're as tricky as a peeweet. Obviously because of the peeweet's habit of doing everything imaginable to trick an intruder away from her nest. As a boy, I remember the exasperation of it myself, till I learnt that wherever the peeweet was showing most excitement was where her chick was not. There is one bird who is firmly entrenched as part of island life, not least because of his unfailing art of making himself heard, the corncrake. One first becomes aware of him in the spring, during the ploughing and the sowing, when an occasional one makes himself heard, as rare as the cuckoo at first. Occasionally, one can catch a glimpse of one scuttering and scuttling here and there between the wild iris patches. As the summer comes in, they become impossible. They hawk and croak all evening like the rattlies at a football match, as long as there's a glisk of daylight. And here in Uist, the summer evenings are very long. Many a man they've driven out of his mind as he tried to sleep after a good day's work, or a good night's dram. The reclaiming of the moorland has had a fairly dramatic effect on the crofters' incomes. Now they're able to keep more cattle because they thrive on the lusher regenerated land. Practically every crofter keeps a beast or two, which he feeds over the winter and sells at the spring sales. People like Donald John MacDonald have developed a certain skill with stock. He always has a fair number of fat beasts at the sales, and usually commands fat prices. The cattle are auctioned at Clachan, which is 7 miles from Hoykerry. It's a long trek for those who can't take advantage of the van. Most of the beasts go to mainland buyers, who can fatten them further on better grazing than island crofters have, and then resell them at the huge sales in the lowlands. A good stirk can sell for 150 to 200 pounds, and even at that, prices are considerably lower than they are on the mainland, because the buyers have to allow for the heavy freight charges they have to pay to get the beasts across the Minch. No crofter can hope to concentrate exclusively on cattle breeding because they haven't, as a general rule, got enough land. A 10-acre croft on its own is just not enough. Perhaps the planner's answer might be to weld many crofts into large farm units, all of which conjures up a picture of a prosperous Uist of the future, populated by a few prosperous farmers, surrounded by myriads of protected birds. There are few sights more awesome than the lone golden eagle soaring in the loneliness of the Hebrides, her eye sharp enough to spot the movement of a baby rabbit 1,000 feet below. The eagle is part of our Gaelic legend and mythology. It's the subject of our songs and emblem of our heroes. But how much does the legend omit of the fact? Ewan MacDonald has shepherded the Uist Hills since he was a boy, and like so many shepherds, he is convinced that the law protects a vicious, deadly killer of lambs. It's been a running argument for years, with the experts firmly entrenched in their view that the golden eagle may possibly take a dead lamb, but will never touch a living one. The shepherd naturally finds it hard to believe that the most powerful bird in the air is going to be kind and soft-hearted when it comes to a cuddly lamb. The trouble is that even Ewan only knows of someone who has seen an eagle take a living lamb. He hasn't got the proof of his own eyes. Meantime, he can only herd his flock in the knowledge that the eagle heroine of his Gaelic folklore can watch every move of himself and his sheep and his lambs, secure not only in the height and isolation of her eyrie, but also safe behind the majesty of the law. eaglet spends 12 weeks in the nest before taking to the air. During that time, the diet provided for her has ranged from rabbits to rats, or any other carrion for that matter. The simple fact is that the golden eagle, for all her advantages of beauty and legend, is as much a scavenger as the hoodie crow or the black-backed gull. There are few lovelier sights than the Machar in summer, when it's matted with flowers, daisies, buttercups, pansies, and hundreds more. These are the fallow parts, used for grazing the cattle during the short summer nights and long days. Small shorebirds like the dunlin often nest in the hoof marks left by the cows. But when the eggs hatch, the parents are in a frenzy trying to herd the chicks away from the trampling hooves of the beasts. They have plenty of time, for there are few things in life more leisurely than a grazing Uist cow. A summer day on the Machar is one of the many things that the islander, forced to live in the city, remembers and hopes to come back to. Many of them never do, till they're carried back at the end. Many islanders take out special insurance policies to guarantee that they're laid to rest in the soil of their homeland when the time comes. In the Hebrides, the kirkyards are usually in sight of the sea. The old men used to say that the autumn came with the grey lag and not with the calendar, and that thousands of miles away the geese could tell exactly when the corn would be ripe in Uist. The wheat ear is of another mind. He is only here in the passing. Winter in Uist is not for him, and he prepares to set off in chase of the sun on other Machar lands. The harvest begins here much later than on the mainland, and indeed often enough the crofters are still garnering the stooks of corn in late October. Their growing plots are not all in the one place, and sometimes they have to wait several days for a neighbour to cut his first swathe before they can make a start. These delays can cause a bit of bad feeling, particularly if people get the impression that they're losing days of good drying weather because of someone else's tardiness. Fine days and good drying winds are priceless gifts in autumn. Which way the corn is cut depends on the way the wind has been blowing and how it has made the corn lie. The crofters' machines are designed to cut in one direction only, and they can operate only when the stems of the corn lie properly for the cutter. The harvest is a fat time for the birds, and they make the most of it. It's an urgent and busy time for the crofters. A really bad harvest can be disaster anywhere, but doubly so on US. Failure means that the winter feed has to be imported from the mainland, and that is why on a day like this, Alistair is glad of the extra help from his young brother Donald.
I left school in June this year. I am 16 years old. I work with my brother since I left school, helping with the cattle and the corn and all the other craft work. I would have liked to go to a college or some place to learn a trade of some kind. And I'm not found a job, and I have to stay here.
The ordinary potato is the most cherished produce of the croft, probably because in our race of long memories, the dreadful days of the potato famine have left a lingering, ghostly shadow. Angus Boyd still uses the traditional Croft gun, the hook which is still regarded as the most thorough and effective instrument for all its simplicity. With it, the potato lifting is fine and accurate, and not an eye is left in the ground. It can be a lonely, back-breaking job, but the potato harvesting is the last and most important chore of autumn. However, it's one for which the whole family can turn out. Even the school children are given a holiday to help, and they're probably the only ones who are sorry to see the last spud lifted. Tayari School must now serve Hoigeri and Balranald as well, and even at that, the school population is only 17.
It would be very good if the young people, after leaving school, if they could have jobs here. Some of them are longing to come back, but others, once they get a taste of the mainland, they want to stay away. But it would be fine to see more young people coming back to work and to carry on the work of their parents.
There are only 155 people left in this beautiful but thankless land, and it's easier to dwell on the past than see into the future. The crofting population can't increase because the land can't support anymore. The young men can't leave for employment elsewhere because employment isn't there. The nightmare is already with them. life is hard here, sometimes cruel in the winter. But the youngest man has survived famine before now. He has survived the most cruel eviction policy this country has ever known. At least today his home is secure to him, and fortune can change tomorrow.
Forse ma quello mi vuole insegna farsi io ja kan klara den unge gade känner det in чем я начал на канал вообще скучал alltså då är så väl att krufta där skучал Jeff Mora kan man nog just det chaval den gaba att så här det bra tart och frågan är att man får rutna häckar så var ju kursen på den botten tuber.
Crofters have neither the feeding nor the weather for dainty pedigrees, and when it comes to the annual calving, crofting wives like Jean MacDonald have to lend a soothing or at least a helping hand.
Rofare där hamnar korrelatet till haps. Jag måste gå ut där sport. Så jag tycker för ut kan jag såna hälften. Jag måste gå och se. Jag ska det iväg. Och sen jag skulle vilka igen va att det är jag har mycket. Jag har också sen det med TV och studio så går det ut där det var kan så kunde se ändå så vet du hur man där så runt så Spanien för att kan inte så snacka ni gamla på jag vill inte ha med sån hela kultur nu det att inte ta komma och det där att säkert kunde
A really bad harvest can be disaster anywhere, but doubly so on US. Failure means that the winter feed has to be imported from the mainland, and that is why on a day like this, Alistair is glad of the extra help from his young brother Donald.
Alltså film var mig kunde filma bra i Alistair jag kan nära gå på den drela. I guess go horst on a daffy. I guess of om inte så att det nella kunde jag kan I guess I'm assuming that Karsten uppsände dem så nu ni går inte dras det sagt vi inte det län sura I guess ma fijn het wel af och nog bedaverstje I guess and this doors to get them law union.
I would have liked to come to a college or some place to learn a trade of some kind. I will not find a job and I have to stay here.
Skulle det nu zijn voor mij apprenticeship dan electrician. Ik ben verder. Ik koop de range, rocket range. I guess dan ik koop de zijn dat zijn plenen. I guess voor mij een manager dat zijn. I guess voor zijn voor mij op in de an the Grianek Corncrake Forest in Hospital. Agus Sena van 1990 agus I mean an hen harvest.
Feest in de geo aan de hitte agus at na bra nuam sa genecht agus am kritchen die guddige gekeleur het tafels van grichte gas rio met een gashecha.
Recently, the Swans have learnt that the Land Rover will appear regularly with loads of corn, and crofters like Angus John McClellan to dispense it.
Actually, kan het door zult in toch door bij de Noors aan bij maat aan de snel dat kan voorgooien. Krijgen het de alle dorst dat je zijn hele aan nodig in van als een aanzet terug.
Tosioch yn lwnesdi, da fil ys y jeich, agos a badjyn ferring ywys dy tŵa na'n bol, le o bydd yn yfyr. Ha trafwch lloni alain fyddyn i alain edrych i croetjalog yn haiari son gynnwchyn. Ha crian ag slwa i ffagal yn slwgad y croetjad yn as y sgide agos ahorichyn na chos.
Han ik dio wel aan je Han je stoch deket aan routinele ligt weer naar de logna routine waarschijnlijk hij hoog zo akronik kan als as niet le akronik in koers het noor zeg maar bouwschet ik heb wie han tractens ne riemen fast nas charge nas smooth akronik as han cool kriegt er na menjen agus am koppelig drie sublet sille warach is toen kom warach kreus maar warach om femi warach aatje gewerkt het kan maken de reus warach vier werkt dus zo'n bier kreus siemru zo ha goed dat maar gebeur vast bekken smoel.
There is one bird who is firmly entrenched as part of island life, not least because of his unfailing art of making himself heard, the corncrake.
Va uade vaggada men trein richlointjen fychne helanen. Ach le schön chlachgi yn aatioch o dolmach a bi hoosich adaf yn y cnianig yn yw han trein y chidig le taich fo skemmichen a bros nog y chroetjaden gyn fiar y jarach gyn y satchaderd y ddeflione agos on yn doi ha gian yn isian.
Als je niet kerug a mewn y paat y mach so nog biw glachig na hewn joker na biw ka glachig doi is hat paat y jarach sam ond dy mwys stui. Zeg, ik heb het recht doen niet aan het dier van gaat het in eleket maar jaarschen als wein maar hij na stoelen ik doen ja jaar ach en asasse in heun je wat motion je wat de chance take al en voor na begin je nou doen we te mij hoe ik stop ik heb de jakers wein ja dus me geht hoe we gedaan dus niet zijn maar het is maar am swin maar op tolgen en skemmig en had al de duw aan hem swinnig geboren ha wie kriegt je moesten heel naar zo wie ik maar dat gaan zo dat ga ik het hier nog wie gaat dat gaan
Langs zet je Shintoshi kare nieuw hier laat ik august. Agus kom sin tosh son checken aga agus loosens vier vind ik is bisschen karagamara.
Ma join donolach na chroetjad og na de chaig de Corncrake aan de Croft te gianu.
Cynny'n doedd byrgyn gwna seir ac y chwachal. Mae sy'n hen cwtioch. Cynny'n mi sienach. Gorsach le byrgyn y siop o'n sy'n hoch mil ys y siach. Gorsach sy'n ys oes i 3 wy'n nŵyd ei gorsach. Siop i chlywyd o'n cwtioch ka. So, dat is niet dat je naar Holo wou. Gehad ik aan neus. Toen het op je later waren, gab ons, toen het zeegens, tocht is, nog het nog vroeger niet. Zo, wat al op je nou noos. Ach, wat doen je nou noos? Zo dat ik niet zo laat. En het was een koetje gedaan noos. Ach, ik nog in jaar geweest.
Yn tachgar I skemmichen son Jón I vrosnochig, haffag in Jeland a haffiaching rismach y goal.
The old men used to say that the autumn came with the grey lag and not with the calendar, and that thousands of miles away the geese could tell exactly when the corn would be ripe in Uist.
In Yugata, ship plai a hasna gioi.
Giag fast skiën pichente feine machig en jas feine gerichtens müssen geriens as Ula hat den middag gian hat Staumburger Aravis hat Salache in Arabers Salache in Iers ha me kutsin Taran differ hinnesen a faatje kopaat gille.
Chai roedd I mach gilibra astig son smach gychamal etna gioi yn eisht. Bia fiaching rin cheichas na pasgin, agus gamonan mar hoplig sin ha kedeket y maraig.
Ha pochgan ac yn ymwneud hel, wel se pochgan a hannes cwtio gyn eisiau bod y rhoch eisiau hannes dŵn iele, a is hannes yn hannes cwtio gyn iele, leisach bod a sy'n rhiach yn ei gian o se. A gerin yn y hel ti sarn is a chai, gyro'n geoed sy'n ysteg an erer an y hel. A is gan iar cwtiwch, a is me hesyn cyr bolcan a gael ag old hos an y hel. Va dawn y hosiwch, ach a mis hwn gyda hosich barach gwyd va resident population, va sam y sir as na smŵr va, am sy'n grotoi yn y geoed, charod palaf mer y babysht. Wat de voediges niet heel hij is machine wat de nietige hij is wat because the explosion is the population machine als je gaere route kin sanske de rafoon kuchok hij is als je sanske bi de hokkes piece de vries no route kin vries kun je ha te bi voor met je nas hij is te bi flappet ik mag de kuchok in vallig als aan de nimmel naar ha zo'n café no route kin hij is als je een mag je zo koppelen maar jullie missen gaan toch een te lachen schiften we hersen toch op mijn ogen aan hitta zei maar het is een natuur wat had de fase oorlog is hij zag het je houden ik had een stee de haken ze zo naar hersen van stoog het je sla dat ik kiesje maar goors in begin heel dat zien dus schön das geht wat de grote stellig te
Es machet valerij gaan je nekjoje ha van jerte genje ach biastes ianlaig agus flurichen in aatje. Ga je een charabon naschen te seo istiachig le common regal gian in ian as na cheskaten agus hanische talig luchturisch o gach aatje. as we moedig garo 15,000 toll in the visitor center. I guess has just tóra sin stór úr tólan hulu bliana. I guess sen dún sin fu da chana B&B sama just at the cosgetic sama just kama kutrum. Sa licht die echtine sin che just son die hanger son ni hewne ni wacha de no lochen hulat sin so het tóra tin jachsan sin echtine. Si anna Nicoliavan yn ofig ar bu ymydog, hain sas an planichen agus prosiecten son arnioch naderen yn elan sier gygian agus de lesochig. Fachgol gaan uren hangen really bij de universiteit. Zeg heel goed dat veel se doel. Ach, misschien kijk je een nieuwtje toe. Hij zijn ik dus niet heel pissen toe natuuran ne wagde se woondiers ne lochen. Zo hoe dat really has ne helen een habitats nog gaan zetten een species zulke die woest ne helen. Na wacha de fémini kruksten vi kopide dag shinigake khokutrimos kho masaha esalu nupar hat takhshin wacha de smara pilkshenaun havige khoma fémi dunje vi utreo sekenu netifut natjanu fatne bliene wacha de skumal kreu so na pil krukstenaun havi wacha de kho mas kho klisha saha.
Like the birds, the Uist man accepts the sea's bounty and uses it in the way which nature surely intended.
Ha felling kladig yn uist haast gachwyd gyffein a chanol na fain bar tor. Has y blwy'n effemyd siwr son y chwyd gyffacteri ad y liwys, far nia ydy gilog son y chwyd on y stuhyn bi agos na sioc. Unrhyw, mar yn ie, chachian ar biolans a wbeth ferin y fai.
No crofter can hope to concentrate exclusively on cattle breeding because they haven't, as a general rule, got enough land. A 10-acre croft on its own is just not enough. Perhaps the planner's answer might be to weld many crofts into large farm units, all of which conjures up a picture of a prosperous Uist of the future, populated by a few prosperous farmers, surrounded by myriads of protected birds.
Ach, gyda'r gyfer sio eith ti'n gwbl a sy'n islwg plani.
Han är riktigt en ounce vagn och morsan. Han har kanske tar vidare film och sen han kanske har tagit när behövde ju. Ach, han har kanske inte gröna vagn och riktigt en bara riktigt en ounce då. Riktigt en morsan har också hungrig så att där riktigt han är så slugg riktigt en agus bara riktigt nachke han har ju från småke.
Fa daif y ddiaf adar na croetiodd agos yn arnioch. Le taic fos gebych yn gleitioch is ha chwb colosan gwyliansio at ha gwylior ein iawn y chymysore le wbeth y chroech.
Os je wilde kun je spelen misschien een jas. Ja, een jas ja die uchri. En je gaat je hoe met je gaat amsterdam bij archie moren. Dat is wat je amsterdam richtig maar een graag chini. Wie moet nog iets amsterdam gaan. Amsterdam gaan. Nu voel je ekel verder. Ik heb een paar verder nog gezien. Dus toen je vaak schijnt, nog kan nog een school gaan. I'm seeing you can go out in the fair school met het tollen. Maar hopelijk nu voel je wel verder dan draußen. Hij zoekt het al haast. Maar zoals een rutje gaat in de verre naar gaar. Sean, musik yn siarad, mae'r hwns grithiach gyda